You might think that putting things off is a problem with how you use your time. You may say that you are lazy, disorganized, or lack motivation. But what if you can't finish things or even get them started because of something that has nothing to do with being productive? What if it's not about your schedule but about your past? Since putting things off isn't always the problem, it's just a sign of a bigger issue. Shame, as a child, has a quiet, hidden effect. You should feel bad about who you were told to be, not what you did. Want to talk about what Carl Jung can teach us about this today? Why the fear of being seen is so strong, and how getting over it can help you not only get things done, but also feel like you can finally live. Part 1. When someone tells you that you're too much, you feel ashamed. Usually, we think of shame as something that happens when we do something wrong. But most of the time, one mistake doesn't cause the kind of shame that shapes your adult life. It happens when you are told that you are wrong at your core. It starts early, so early on, in fact, that you might not even be aware of how deeply it shapes who you are. Most likely, you were just being yourself. You might have been full of questions, life, and feelings. You might have been quick to cry or laugh out loud. Or maybe you had big ideas and a crazy mind, and then someone did something. You were told to calm down, grow up, and stop being so cute. It's also possible that they didn't say anything. They either looked at you with sadness or pulled away from you when you needed love the most. You didn't know why they did it. You only knew that being there seemed to make things tense, that being seen, heard, and just being yourself made you feel bad and in pain. A child feels like they are in danger. Carl Jung thought that things we push down as kids don't go away. It goes down below. It becomes part of our shadow, which is made up of the inner parts of us that we don't want to show, but still have an effect on how we act. He wrote, "Accepting oneself is the core of the moral problem and the ideal of a whole outlook on life." But how can you accept yourself if you were told from a young age that you are flawed? So you changed. It looked like you tried to fit in better. You smiled, even though you weren't happy. You didn't say anything when you really wanted to. You shrunk down, became more careful, and became easier to eat. You began to edit yourself. This editing gets so natural over time that you don't even know you're doing it, but your nervous system is aware of it. It also keeps score. Shame isn't loud. Not all the time does it show itself with big emotional displays. Sometimes you can tell you have it by the way you pause before you say what you think, in how you make your ideas less strong. You're hesitant to act, not because you don't think you can, but because a deep part of you still fears being turned down. Jung also said, "We can't change anything until we accept it." Condemnation doesn't free, it shackles. A lot of people blame themselves for putting things off without realizing what's making them do that. Because shame can remember things. Your head may have moved on as an adult, but your emotional body still remembers the first time it was hurt for being real. And I will always remember this. It changes how you feel about work, speech, and even success. So it shouldn't be a surprise that the things you want most, creative freedom, acceptance, and trust in yourself, also feel the most dangerous. This is because they need to be seen. And being seen was what hurt you before. Think about the times you put off doing something important to you. You were scared because you cared so much, not because you didn't care. Some part of you remembers, "It wasn't safe the last time I was completely myself." This means that putting things off is your body's way of saying, "Not yet." It doesn't trust that you will accept it. Right here is where putting things off starts. He wasn't lazy. He was scared. You learned this fear early on, when people told you you were too loud, too sensitive, too vocal, too emotional, or too much. You didn't question them. You asked yourself questions. That's what shame does. It makes what they did to you seem like something you do is wrong. You start to think that hiding is safer than telling the truth, that not trying is smarter than showing up, and that not trying at all is better than being seen and maybe turned down. What if you're not too much? What if you were never there? Maybe someone didn't know how to deal with your being alive because you were too alive. What if putting things off isn't a flaw, but a sign from the part of you that still thinks being seen will cost you something? Jung thought that the dark side should be brought into the light. He thought that the parts of us that we hide are not our foes. They are the keys that make us whole. So the next time you find yourself pausing, putting things off, or getting distracted, take a moment to ask yourself, what part of me is afraid? And what does that part remember? That's how healing starts. Not by trying harder, but by paying more attention, not in getting more done, but in taking back the parts of yourself that were once made to feel like they weren't good enough to be seen. Chapter 2. Putting things off as a way to feel safe, emotionally. People often think that putting things off is a sign of weak willpower that needs to be fixed with more control, better habits, and stricter schedules. But if you look deeper, putting things off isn't a sign of lack of effort. It's a reaction from your nervous system, a quiet, unconscious attempt to keep you safe from something that made you feel scared or overwhelmed in the past. It looks safe at first glance. You put something off. You say you'll do it tomorrow, but tomorrow keeps going. The list of things to do keeps getting longer, and a bigger story is going on underneath. You're putting off a job because it's not just a task. It has meaning, emotional weight, and a sense of risk for the person doing it. A lot of people don't think that danger is related to the work itself. It has to do with what it stands for. You might be putting off writing something not because it's hard, but because it still makes you feel exposed to say what you really think. You might put off finishing a job not because you're careless, but because when you do, someone will be able to see it and judge it. Maybe you don't want to start something new because you still think that whatever you do will never be good enough. This isn't because you're lazy. What you resist not only stays, but gets bigger. Carl Jung once said, most of the time, procrastination is that quiet reluctance. Not against effort, but against being seen, because of the emotional risks that come with being seen, judged, or even praised. Because praise and criticism can feel just as dangerous when you were taught you don't deserve them. There are a lot of people who think they will fail. But the fear of success is just as real, and sometimes even more so, because being successful makes you known. Being seen gets people's attention, and attention can be scary, especially for someone who grew up feeling watched or not understood. So, the mind learns a way to keep itself safe. Delay. I can avoid what comes next if I don't do it. I can't fail if I don't try. It won't be judged if I don't finish it. In a way, it makes you feel safe. It's not reasonable, but it's deeply protective. And the more you point the finger at yourself, the less safe it feels to move forward. Jung thought that the mind has barriers that keep it safe. One of these defenses is putting things off, which is a sneaky way to avoid mental pain. The thing that scares you may not be clear to you, but your body does. It remembers the hurt of being turned down in the past, the shame of being called out, and the silence after telling the truth and no one responding. So now that it's time to move, your nervous system isn't sure what to do. This doesn't mean you're weak. That's a sign of history, a sign that your work became linked to mental risk at some point. You learned that it costs something to try. So your mind set up a way to keep you safe, a wait, a pause, some space between you and the danger. We now call that place putting things off. But when you see putting things off for what they really are, a way to stay alive, they stop being a moral failing and start being a message. It's a sign that you still feel unsafe and need understanding and not punishment. Nothing like gentleness. You don't have to push yourself harder to stop putting things off. You need to figure out why and what part of you is scared. That's where the healing starts. Instead of motivational videos or work hacks, you should really look inside yourself. For me, what does this task mean? What would happen to my feelings if I did what I said I would do? What voice do I hear when I think about ending it? Also, what story do I still have about what it means to be seen? It's said by Carl Jung that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. In many ways, putting things off is that absurd thing, a way to stay away from the inner conflict, a way to stay away from the fear of being judged, rejected, or even left behind. You can stop fighting yourself once you see it for what it is. You no longer have to see delay as a threat. Instead, you can see it as an opportunity. A question to think about: what am I really trying to keep safe, and how can I make that part of me feel safe enough to move on? Because you don't have to wait when you feel safe. You don't have to hide when you feel like you belong. And the work gets easier once you don't think being seen is dangerous. You start to act not out of fear, but from a quiet confidence that says, I can show up, I can be real, and I can survive whatever comes next. Part 3. The hidden self versus the persona. We learn how to wear a mask as children when we feel judged, misunderstood, or just not safe to be ourselves. This is an important skill for our mental survival. But not the kind you see in the mirror. The kind you get when you want to say something honest, but choose to be nice instead. The kind that shows up when you want to say what's on your mind, but first change it into something that seems okay. Carl Jung called that mask the ego. It's the version of you that you changed to be liked, accepted, and stay out of trouble. There's the social self, which is the person you show when being honest would be too dangerous. In a world that made you question your worth at some point, it's how you fit in, stay out of trouble, and know who you are. Jung said that the persona is a set of behaviors that are influenced by society and the person's desire to fit in with that culture. It's not a lie, but it's also not the whole truth. What's wrong is not that we have a character. We all do. We can get around with it. It lets us play different parts, like at work, in public, and with friends. But things go wrong when the image is the only thing people see about us. When the mask stays on for so long that we forget what we look like without it. This is where putting things off can happen. Not because of a lack of time, but because of a clash of identities. When you have to be honest, present emotionally, creative, or truly vulnerable, the job at hand wants you to act from the hidden self, the part of you that lives behind the mask. The person who was turned down or told to hide in the past. The self that isn't sure if it's safe to be seen yet. Now you're in a tough spot. Instead of easing the stress, your mind freezes. The mask says, let's do what's expected. But your deeper self says, I can't show up like that. You hold up. You wait, not because you don't want to move forward, but because you feel like you need to please everyone and be real at the same time. The nerves in your body don't know which one is safe. You might be working hard, making deadlines, and crossing things off your list, but you might not feel connected to what you're doing. That's what the character is supposed to do. You're getting by, but you're not living. You're at work, but you're not really there. For too long of a time, that lack of relationship makes you feel tired. You lose your drive. You have no idea why. And the things that used to look like they could be done now feel impossible. That's because your secret self, the part of you that knows your true self, wants and speaks up, has been left out. That part of you stops working with you when it is shut down for too long. You put things out that you're lazy. It's because a part of you doesn't want to live the fake life you've been forced to live. It was Carl Jung who said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. If you only look for approval from other people, you build your life around that image. When you look inside, though, You start to see the real you behind the mask. After that, things change. Is this really me? Is what you ask yourself, instead of how can I be more productive? When you put things off, ask yourself, who am I trying to be right now? And is that person someone I picked out or someone I made to stay alive? The reason being is that your true self might not want to do what your image wants you to do. Your true self might want to move or talk in a different way, be more honest, and make art from a deeper place. And when you don't include your true self, your work loses its life. You lose your drive and your energy levels drop. It's not because you don't care, but because you can't act like you do. That's what it costs to live only through the image. You could go on. You may keep making things, but you're not in touch with the important part of yourself, the part that feels and wants to be seen as real, not perfect. And when that deeper self is rejected over and over, procrastination speaks for it. It says, I'm still here and I don't want to be buried again. Think about what part of you isn't being heard before you push harder. What do you not want to say? The truth. What face mask are you sick of? Because as soon as you bring even a little of your real self into it, the hold-up starts to break. The wait gets shorter, and you start to find your way forward without force, but by being honest. Reading Jung's work helps us remember that changing who we are doesn't mean we're healed. It means becoming who you really are. The persona may have kept you alive, but your life starts to feel like your own when you connect with your secret self, that quiet part of you that you've forgotten about. Chapter 4, the loop of shame and shadow. It's likely something you've done so many times that you can't remember them all. You chose a goal. It could be something small, like checking your email, or something big, like beginning the art project you've been thinking about for months. In the beginning, there's a spark of drive and clarity. You tell yourself, I can do this. You're ready and almost excited. Then, out of the blue, something unseen pulls you backwards. A weight and a fog. All of a sudden, you feel confused, unworthy, and unsure. What if I mess it up, is what you really want to know. What if it's not good enough? What if people laugh, or even worse, don't care? So you close the tab, check your phone, and get a snack. You don't do the one thing you said you would. Then the guilt sets in. Now you have to deal with your own criticism on top of the job you put off. You insult yourself. You're upset about it. You wish this wouldn't happen so often. It's the shame coming back. It's twice as bad now that you're not just feeling bad about putting off the job. You feel bad that you're the type of person who puts things off. This is the loop of shame. And when you see it, you understand how much it changes the way you live. Carl Jung said that the shadow is the part of ourselves that we reject, push down, or ignore. He said it was everything the person didn't want to admit about themselves. But here's what most people get wrong. The shadow doesn't just hold clearly bad traits like greed or anger. It also has shame in it. Shame isn't always loud either. It doesn't always yell. It can be quiet and subtle at times. It wears the voice of reason sometimes. What they really mean is fear. They might say things like, I'll do it tomorrow, or I don't want to mess this up, or even, it's probably not that important anyway. It's a shame. Because you feel deeply that you are not ready, able, or allowed to take up room the way you secretly want to. When you decide to do something important to you, the loop starts. The very act of going forward could bring up your hidden shame, and shame doesn't like being seen. The shade then steps in to protect it by making it avoid things. This makes sense. I can't be judged if I don't finish this. People won't get the wrong idea about me if I never talk. No one will see the parts of me I'm still embarrassed about if I stay small. That makes me feel safer. To avoid the guilt, though, you only make it worse. When you put something off, you feel better for a short time, but you always feel bad about it later. The time you didn't use, the chances you missed, and the goals you keep putting off make you feel bad, give you another reason to hide, and give you another shadow to carry. Jung warned that what you fight will not only stay with you, but it will also get bigger. The more you try to avoid facing your shame, the stronger it gets until it shapes how you see yourself, your skills, and your future. The loop doesn't just keep you stuck, it also changes who you are in a quiet way. You start to see putting things off as something you are, instead of something you do. I'm just someone who never finishes things. I'm the kind of person who always ruins opportunities. I'm always behind, but all of that is wrong. There are no names there. They are signs or symptoms. They tell your mind, there is pain here. There is a wound that hasn't been looked at. And whenever you try to move forward, that wound gets opened. How then do you get out of the loop? You can't force yourself to get through it. Not by being hard on yourself to get things done, but by becoming completely aware of everything. When shame starts to set in, I ask myself, what is this really about? What am I afraid people will see if I finish this? What might it mean about me if I actually succeed? What part of me still believes that being seen will hurt me? These questions aren't meant to help you get more done. The shame shadow loop doesn't end when the work is done, so these questions are meant to free you. When the self feels safe, it breaks. When you were younger and learned how to hide, that part of you starts to think that maybe soon they won't have to, that the world might have changed, that you might have changed, and that being there isn't a threat, it's a return. Jung thought that the way to become whole was to face your evil instead of running away from it. His words were, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the first step. Not by getting your to-do list just right, but by figuring out what's holding you back from acting." You should take a moment to notice when you feel stuck, frozen, or busy. Do not judge. Ask. Find out what makes you scared. Find out what the fear is trying to keep you from. Find out what story it fits into. Then tell yourself that shame doesn't get to decide what you do next. The shadow doesn't have the right to hold your possible hostage. Yes, you do. You get a little more of yourself back every time you break the loop, even if it's just by being aware of it. You get out of the shame. As you accept your shadow, you stop moving as someone who is broken and start moving as someone who is learning to return to their true, whole self. Part 5. Being aware of a pattern is the first step to breaking it. Something starts to change. As soon as you understand that your procrastination isn't just because you're lazy, but because you need to protect yourself, you might have a moment of silence or a second thought before you start to blame yourself. But that pause is very important. When there is a pause, awareness starts to break out of the automatic pattern. This chapter is basically what Carl Jung said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Saying to yourself, "I'm not lazy, I'm afraid," is a strong way to break out of the shame shadow loop. Not everything is being fixed at once. You're just noticing it, feeling it, and being interested in it, instead of criticizing it. For many of us, the hardest part is just realizing that being aware is the first step. We've been told that only action, productivity, and results that can be measured are important. But doing things doesn't help heal. It starts with seeing, with being open to say, I avoid this task not because it's hard, but because deep down, I'm terrified it might show I'm not good enough. I delay writing that email, applying for that job, finishing that project because it touches something raw inside me, the part of me that still believes I'll be rejected if I show up fully. Being aware of that may bring sadness. One day, you may learn that you spent many years thinking you were broken when in fact you were just hiding a hurt part of yourself. You might even be mad at the people, places, or systems that told you that your worth depended on how well you did or how perfect you were. Let your anger show that you are living. That means you're not sleeping in the rhythm anymore. Being aware doesn't mean you stop putting things off all of a sudden. But now you know why. When you do, you can take a step back and ask yourself, this task is making me feel unsafe. What part of me feels unsafe right now? Instead of judging that part, you start to make space for it. This is how you slowly break the link between feeling bad about yourself and staying away from things that make you feel bad. It's not about making yourself do something. To see, you have to gently ask yourself to do so. Seeing makes you understand, and understanding gets rid of judgment. Stop judging your procrastination and start listening to it instead. It will be less of a problem and more of a warning than a sentence. That's the first step to getting your power back. It's not through effort, but by seeing it happen. What you can't see can't be changed. But it doesn't own you once you see it clearly. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how doing small, safe things can start to build new neural paths that are based on trust instead of fear. Chapter 6. How to reparent a child who was afraid of being noticed. You may have had many times in your early years when being seen made you feel like you were in real mental danger. It wasn't just awkward or scared. Someone may have been rude to you because you spoke too loudly, asked too many questions, were too excited, or showed strong emotion. They may have made fun of you, told you to sit down, be quiet, or stop being so proud. Deep in your brain, a message was sent at that moment. If I'm seen, I'll get hurt. That's the kid you're now learning how to fix. When you reparent, you don't have to act like the past never happened. It means giving the younger part of you the safety and love it's never had. You need to accept yourself fully, not just your quiet, controlled, and polished side, but also the messy, emotional, and expressive parts that used to get you in trouble. As Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Most of the time, this secret child is the one who stops you from putting things off. It's not that they are stubborn, but they still think that something bad will happen if they get too close to the big picture. Being exposed means pain. It's scary to be successful. Fear is caused by attention. You wait. You keep quiet. You say you're not ready yet. But deep down, there is a younger version of me that just wants to feel safe enough to be herself without fear of being judged. When you reparent, you listen to that voice with care instead of criticism. It's telling the fear, I know why you're scared. You were told that being too loud, too bright, or too visible made people uncomfortable, but you're safe now. You don't have to disappear to be loved. You're not scolding yourself into confidence. You're calming down a part of you that was never allowed to fully exist. This work won't end one time. Every day, every hour, especially right before you start something new, like a big job, an opportunity, or a challenge, there will be pushback. You'll feel the old fear of being seen again. You can no longer push through or shut down. Instead, you can pause, breathe, and talk to yourself in a different way. You'll say, yes, this is scary, but I'm here. I'll protect you. We don't have to hide anymore. Changing your standards is another part of reparenting. You don't have to lose your fear overnight. You just need to be a little kinder to yourself today than you were yesterday. You don't got to do everything at once. You only need to take one small step to show your inner kid, look, we were seen, we made it, and nothing bad happened. These little wins start to change the way your brain works over time. You start to separate shame from the decisions you're making now. You learn that being afraid doesn't mean you have to stop. It means be careful as you go. You make a new kind of safety that comes from inside. Carl Jung told us that becoming who you really are is the greatest honor of your life. You get that right back by reparenting. That's how you give yourself permission to be fully present, to speak freely, and to create without having to say sorry. And you'll put things off less often. if you do that often. No, not because you made yourself follow the rules, but because you felt safe. You stopped making being seen the enemy. Fear was no longer a sign for you to hide. Instead, you began to value yourself enough to show up for yourself. Start asking yourself, what do I need to feel safe enough to begin, instead of what's wrong with me? In the next chapter, this will help you stop putting things off. Build a life where it's safe to be seen, in Chapter 7. It's not just how you think. It's about making certain that you can be yourself both inside and outside of work. That could mean working in places that value growth over perfection. Being honest with yourself about which projects really show your style could be part of it. Jung thought of individuation as the process of changing from the person you were taught to be to the person you really are. A lot of putting things off goes away when the thing you're working on is in line with who you really are. You're not pushing yourself to do something anymore. You're going with it. You're no longer dancing. You're saying something. The goal isn't to stop people from putting things off, to understand it, to hear it, and to grow up from the part of you you had to hide, to feel safe. The truth is that you don't have to be brave. You don't have to be completely better. You only need to want to do it. It's no longer possible to put things off until you feel ready. Instead, you have to get going, even if you're scared. You can be afraid and still do things. As Jung said, only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. You can be unsure and still make art. You can be flawed and still deserve to be seen. How you feel about being lazy is often just a dream that's been hidden under shame. A voice that wants to talk but is afraid. No one will hear it. Allow that voice to be heard. Listen to it. Let it be a mess. Allow it to happen. You're not behind. It's getting better. Remember that the fear of being seen is no longer in charge every time you take a step. Any step. I hope this video helped. Don't forget to like, share, and follow if this spoke to you. Please get in touch with me. Leave a comment below to share your ideas or stories. Thanks for watching.